Because of the coronavirus pandemic, some are asking, how can I exercise my right to vote? Because of rampant voter suppression, how can I be sure that my vote will be counted? Because of the assault on the U.S. Postal Service, how can I be certain that my mail-in vote will not be disqualified? These are all fair and urgent questions. Make no mistake, voter suppression is real. But don't be fooled. Voter fraud is a myth, and it is clear that efforts are being made at the highest levels of government to destroy the Postal Service and discredit voting by mail or by absentee ballots. But if your vote is precious, you must protect it. If your vote is almost sacred, you must make sure it's counted. And if your vote is the most powerful nonviolent tool in a democratic society, you must do whatever it takes to exercise it. If you can make it to the polls, go and vote. If you can't make it to the polls, mail it in. If you can't mail it in, drop it off at your local voter registration office. If you can't drop it off, have a family member or friend drop it off for you. Let's honor the memory of Congressman John Lewis and all those who shed blood on that Alabama bridge and gave their lives to secure our precious right to vote. There is far too much at stake. Our rights, our health, our very lives and livelihood. Vote early. Vote today. Vote now.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Barbara William Skinner, president of Skinner Leadership Institute and co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network. I am so pleased to greet all of you tonight for this very important election protection webinar for Florida pastors and church-based lawyers. I'm grateful for the partnership in this work of sojourners, Reverend Adam Taylor, Reverend Jim Wallace, and the Reverend Terrence McKinley for making this all possible. We understand tonight that so much is at stake in this election. I don't need to tell you that this is life or death for many families. It's a choice between an America going further back than we are now, or America that includes all of its people. The vote is a weapon, a nonviolent weapon, as John Lewis has so with his life reminded us. This is a webinar that will equip pastors, hopefully, and their clergy, their sacred collars, and the church-based lawyers at polling sites of vulnerable voters in the spirit of Matthew 25, caring for the least of these, our brothers and sisters. This webinar will give you just the tools that you need to know exactly what to do and how to tie in to the Lawyers and Collars virtual hotline and command center. We are so grateful to be started tonight in the right way, the only way, the way of power, through the word of God as given to us in an opening word and prayer by the Reverend Dr. C.P. Preston. C.P. Preston is the president of the Florida General Baptist Convention. Reverend Dr. Preston, thank you for opening us up tonight. You need to unmute yourself.
Our Father in heaven, our Father, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we come now to thank you for this day. Thank you for your loving kindness and your tender mercies. Makes you bless this webinar today, so that your will be done in this webinar as it is in heaven. Keep us, O God, forever in your care. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much for getting us started on the right way and the right road, Reverend Dr. Preston. And now it is my pleasure to bring to you for special greetings from, first of all, my sister in this work, Ms. Kim McCrae, statewide faith-based advisor has been working with us for many, many months, and we're grateful for all that you have done. Followed by the Rev Dr Bartholomew Banks, President, Progressive Missionary and Educational Baptist State Conference of Florida. And then wrapping it up with Bishop A.J. Richardson, Presiding Prelate, 11th Episcopal District AME Church, in that order, starting with Ms. McCray.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking to you as soldiers in the battle for justice and restoration of our democracy. You've been pushing knowledge, encouraging family, friends, and members of your congregations that this is the time to vote. There is not enough time to run down all the reasons why we need to go to the extra mile this year, but I can sum it up in one word, and it starts with a T. We are 14 days away from the start of early voting. Ballots are already in the hands of voters. Florida is a battleground state with 29 electoral votes and more than 14 million registered voters, meaning there's a lot of anticipated activity that will happen in our state, including a huge increase in vote by mail ballots. We can't take anything for granted because voter suppression is real. But it's sad to say that some level of voter suppression is self-inflicted. So when you hear people say they aren't voting, that is self-inflicted voter suppression. But we are not putting our energy in those who are willing. So we're not putting our energy in those that's not voting, but we are putting our energy in those that's willing and determined to vote and to help them overcome all obstacles that may be put in their way. I want to thank you for being in your communities, for doing stellar work, being a trusted voice and participating today, because you know things cannot stay the same. Let's overperform and win Florida.
Thank you so much. Reverend Dr. Bartholomew Banks, you would greet us. Can you unmute yourself, please?
All right, thank you so very much to Dr. William Skinner and to all of my fellow clergy and all of the workers in this faith fight. I'm honored to greet you on behalf of Progressive MED Baptist State Convention of Florida. My mind goes to passages of scripture that says, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and mind through Christ Jesus. There's ever been a time in which we need to pray. Now is that time. I know that prayer is no substitute for performance. There is a performance measure that we have to take part in, but the spiritual aspect of it cannot be diminished because we're in some challenging times. And if we are not careful, we can go down into a despondent attitude, a desperate attitude, and become hopelessly in despair. And so when we pray, it allows us to lift our mind beyond the situation and circumstance to the God that we know that is able to make a difference in our lives. So as we encourage our people to vote, we also need to encourage them to pray. Let their requests be made known unto God and allow the peace of God that passes all understanding to guard their hearts from all of the apathy that is out there trying to keep us from getting to where God has destined us to be. So we are committed to getting our people out to vote. And I thank God for all of you that are on the call that will receive this information that will equip us and help us to be able to be more effective in what we're doing to bring about change in our nation. God bless you and keep you is my prayer.
Thank you so much. And Bishop Richardson will give us our call to action.
He's muted.
Bishop Richardson has to unmute himself, please.
All right, to Dr. William Skinner and to Ms. McCrae, Dr. Preston and Dr. Banks, and all the clergy persons represented on the line tonight, and to those who are from the legal profession who are represented here on the line tonight, let me bring you greetings from the African Methodist Episcopal Church and the 11th Episcopal District, persons involved in the Get Out the Vote effort all across the 11th District and throughout the AME Church worldwide. I'm just so delighted to be a part of this effort and to demonstrate how much we are committed to the voting process. We've been saying all along that elections have consequences, and they do. As a matter of fact, we're in the throes of an election right now that demonstrates how important elections are. We've gone through what amounts to a disappointment in what has happened to our nation, which demonstrates also how important this election is. It is important for us to get out the vote. I'm wearing a pin right now, a lapel pin that says Black Votes Matter. It is my hope that all of us together collectively can push our people to the polls, can encourage our people to get to the polls, because indeed elections do have consequences. I'm so thankful that we're involved in the collaboration with the lawyers and scholars effort, and grateful to Dr. William Skinner for initiating this effort. And I believe that it just has such a great opportunity for us to make a difference, especially in a state like Florida. It is my hope that all of us can make the difference, especially when we know that so many persons actually gave blood for the right to vote. There's no need for us to squander that. Let's all get out to do our part to make sure that we get our people to the polls. It's more than just protesting. We need to get to the polls and exercise our right to vote. I'm so delighted to be a part of this. Let's go do our part. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reverend Bishop Richardson. You always inspire us, and you, as always, you've done it again. We are ready. And now this program, this campaign is possible because of a stellar partnership with Sojourners. And I'm so grateful tonight to have the Reverend Adam Taylor, President-elect of Sojourners, to connect the dots between our faith in just a couple of minutes and our vote. Reverend Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. It really is a pleasure and honor to be with you tonight. So grateful for the partnership through Lawyers and Callers and TurnOut Sunday. I want to thank Kim McCrae, Reverend Preston, Dr. Banks, Bishop Richardson, and all the other clergy that make this work possible in the state of Florida. Once again, Florida is being thrust into the epicenter of the most tumultuous and arguably the most consequential election, certainly in my lifetime. And it is your dedication, your sacrifice, your commitment that is going to enable Florida and other parts of the country to have a free, fair, and safe election. We know that we are living in what feels like apocalyptic times. And I don't mean that reference in the end times sense of it. I mean the original biblical meaning of apocalypse, which is to unveil, to reveal what has been there for far too long. We know the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and systemic racism and police violence is ripping the Band-Aid off of the ongoing lie of white supremacy and the ongoing struggle for racial justice. So we know that those and so many other issues are at stake in this election. Sojourners is proud to be a partner in this effort. And we've been writing a series of articles that is trying to make the case that the cross-cutting issue of racism really is the religious issue or the primary religious issue in this election. And welcome you to check that out and to learn more at sojo.net. We're a part of the campaign because we believe that voting is an act of Christian discipleship. and that when votes are denied or derailed because of disinformation campaigns or intimidation or a whole playbook of voter suppression tactics, it literally assaults the very image of God. We know that every voter is made in the likeness and image of God, and therefore deserves to be protected. You're going to hear a lot more details about how we believe that you as clergy can play an indispensable role as chaplains at polling sites. We've been doing a lot of advocacy to hold election officials accountable for a free, fair, and safe election, and I'm grateful for so many of you for joining those efforts in the state of Florida. And now we're moving into a phase where not only do we have to educate and motivate voters about why it is essential for them to vote, we have to do everything in our power to protect the vote, particularly in light of a president who literally in this last debate showed his cards, showed his true colors, and once again refused to accept the results of the election and continued to sow doubt and disinformation in this election, alleging fraud because of a surge of vote by mail without a shred of evidence. And so our ongoing advocacy is essential. Your ongoing advocacy is essential. And your presence as chaplains at polling sites could make the difference between someone being able to cast their vote or being turned away and intimidated. I'll just end with this. When you think about the word chaplain, a chaplain is that clergy member that serves oftentimes a university or a prison in some cases. Well, we need, in this case, chaplains at the poll to provide care and support, to provide protection and safety to voters who will be coming, hopefully in record numbers, to cast their vote and to exercise their constitutional rights. And in our case, to exercise their Christian discipleship. And so we're so grateful for the opportunity to be able to come alongside you. And we are fully committed in prayer and in action to do everything we can together to ensure that every voter is able to vote and every vote is counted in this election. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Adam Taylor. And now we're grateful to get right into the webinar and all we need to do to get ready for Election Day in Florida. Thank you, Ms. Keena Jackson, our Senior National Coordinator of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, Gabriella Velasco, and Mr. Ryan Snow. Thank you so much. If you would get us started, please.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Keena Jackson, Senior National Coordinator for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I'm excited to be here, and I know the Lawyers Committee is excited to work with all of you on Election Day and get all of the EP chaplains and our church-based lawyers trained to do the good work. So today I'm joined by Gabrielle and Miss Julie Hauk from Election Protection, and they'll take it from here.
Great, thank you so much. Keena, can you help us get those slides set up so we can get started? Great. So everyone, my name is Gabriella Velasco, and I'm a National Coordinator with Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and I'm really excited to be joining you all today and speaking about the great work we're looking to do this November. So to get us started, I just wanted to outline a few of today's objectives. First and foremost, to understand the overall structure of election protection. Secondly, to understand your role as an EP ambassador and EP chaplain and what to expect. Third, to be able to navigate the EP structure and resources that we have available for you to answer any common questions and record any information. And fourth, to become familiar with the basics of Florida election law. So an introduction, who are we? We have been around for many years, since the early 2000s. And since then, we have recruited and mobilized over 12,000 grassroots and legal volunteers. We have held 12 national and local call centers, taking 6 simultaneous calls, 4 of them live and 2 on hold, just to show our capacity for what we're able to do and the questions we're able to answer for voters across the country. Our hotline number for the national level is 866-OUR-VOTE and has received over 200,000 calls since our inception. We are currently functioning as a field program that includes legal volunteers, field volunteers, and grassroots partners in at least 30 states and growing. And some of the roles that we take on as part of election protection is voter education prior to the election, poll worker recruitment, and litigation when and where it is necessary. We strive to make sure that everyone is able to cast a vote when they wish to do so. To give you all a better overview of what our program does, I'd love to break it down into two silos, hotline and field. Callers to the hotline are able to answer any questions from voters on the hotline. For your program, you'll be calling 8334 TurnOut. And for field program, which you all will be a part of as an EP chaplain, you'll be on the ground at polling locations, helping voters with problems, answering any questions, or being dispatched depending on the program's capabilities and availability that day. We hope to have a lot of you out there to help as many voters as possible. And then this all will be able to be cataloged in our database called Our Vote Live, so we can maintain and keep a record of everything that's happening at the polls. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague Kina to speak about the Lawyers and Callers volunteer structure.
So I get the honor of working with all of the EP chaplains and all of the state leads and Dr. Skinner to create a structure that allows you all to have your questions answered in real time on election day. So pastors, EP chaplains, and the attorneys on the ground will have the opportunity to call our 8334 Turnout hotline. That hotline is going to be filled with attorneys that are trained and ready to take your calls on election day. Feel free to use that hotline as your one-stop resource for all of your questions. So we'll be providing you with top issues in our FAQ documents, but you'll also have this hotline with trained volunteers ready to take your calls. Again, that's 8334 Turnout. So throughout the day, there are going to be issues that we may not be able to answer quickly. Our volunteers may need to make some extra phone calls. We may need to have a conversation with an election administrator, and we may do that with the help of our state partners. Those calls are escalated into our command center, and your state lead and state attorneys will be working with us to make sure that information flows back down to you all. So you'll be in direct contact with your field captain, your hotline specialists, and your state attorneys on election day in order to get all of your questions answered. And I'm going to turn it back over to Gabrielle.
Thanks so much, Kina. Now we're going to go into a little bit more in depth of what your role would be as an election protection chaplain. So your shift. On election day, you'll be given an assignment from your field captain in your region that will give you an address of a polling place or polling places for you to monitor. Something to be very aware of is it's going to be a busy day, and it's always great to arrive at least 15 minutes early. First and foremost, though, it's important for us to reiterate that we understand this is a pandemic and your safety is our priority. So please wear a mask and practice social distancing at the polls. Also, whenever possible, please introduce yourself to poll workers or other poll monitors and make it clear that you are a nonpartisan volunteer while social distancing. We will reach out more with some best practices and guidelines, but just remember 6 feet apart and practice as much common sense as possible in this time to make sure everyone is safe. And then just briefly about your work. You're there to help voters and to record the questions that they need answered. We'll go into a little more detail about what kind of questions you should expect at the polls, but your main goal there is to make sure that everyone has the education that they need to be able to cast their ballot. Next slide, please. So what to bring? Your mask. I can't say this enough. Please bring your mask when you go to the polls. And as we move forward, we'll go into more detail about some resources we'll have available for you. That will include top issues and frequently asked questions for Florida election law. And then whenever possible, bring your credentials, a form of ID, your phone and charger. It's going to be a long day and there's going to be a lot of communicating to do. Layers of clothing. It's going to be November. It's hard to imagine now with the perfect fall weather we're having, but just keep in mind that it's going to be a very long election day. Water, snacks, comfortable shoes, and any forms that you need to keep track of those records of voter questions, and extra pens and paper. So again, your role is there to just assist voters. We are a nonpartisan organization and program, and we are there to make sure that everyone can cast their ballot. And as part of this, you're to be the eyes and ears of our program, to identify and report any problematic practices you see at the polls, any patterns you see that are concerning. We're sure to expect a lot on election day. So what do you do when you see a problem? So you're gonna call our Lawyers and Callers number 833-4-TURNOUT. And the number is right there. This is some things that we anticipate seeing at the polls because we have seen them before. Broken machines, poll workers giving incorrect information, intimidating flyers or police presence, which I'm sure we all are prepared for given the current climate. Multiple voters reporting that they are not on the rolls, something that we've seen in the past has been a considerable concern for purged voter registration. As you know, today is the last day to be on the voter roll in Florida, so we want to flag that as well. A high use of people who were told that their only option to vote was provisional ballots. Again, during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of polling places open late and close early because they've been understaffed. Voters who are not able to speak English, not having the same access to the polls as somebody who's an English speaker, and then polling places that are not physically accessible. So if somebody is not able to enter a polling location because there is no ramp, that's something we certainly want to be aware of. And how do you report these issues? So first and foremost, you'll be calling the hotline and speaking with a volunteer. You should always include the following information: your name and how to call back if something were to happen and we need more information, or if we were to be cut off. The polling location you are at, that address is always helpful. If the voter has shared their ethnicity with you or their racial identity, and any details needed to follow up. So when we escalate an issue, if we're able to answer it immediately, the volunteer on the call will be able to help you. If not, it'd be escalated, and these details are necessary when we're escalating a ticket. And then also, if you're forwarding on any information, please call your field captain as well if you need further assistance. So why is reporting data so important? We get this question often, and it's very important to just show the impact of the work we're doing. So EP leadership in your command center will be able to see these issues in real time, allowing them to follow up with the voter, poll workers, election officials, which is something we've done often to address issues. Additionally, this information helps us address trends across both the state, if not the county, and sometimes nationally. We've used this data as much as possible, both on election day and afterwards. We've done this in the past by identifying an issue in 2014's primary. We were able to use towards advocacy to improve the voting situation at the polls. So again, we certainly use this information. And then just some notes to remember before I pass it on to my colleague Julie, who will handle the voting rights law for Florida. Things to remember: if you take away anything from my portion of the presentation, please remember to call the turnout number to report any problems and ask questions and get those answers. That we are nonpartisan, that we help all voters, that please do not share your political beliefs with voters or other volunteers while working under the Lawyers and Callers umbrella. Please, please, please emphasize your safety, wear a mask, and practice social distancing. And as well, please refer to yourself as a trained volunteer, not a lawyer or the voter as a client for those who are church-based attorneys. And election day is sure to be stressful. A little kindness and politeness goes a long way. So things to keep in mind as we head out to the polls and what I'm sure is going to be a very chaotic day. And I will pass it on to Julie to talk about some tools and resources.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to be with you this evening. We really appreciate our partnership with Lawyers and Callers and hope we're going to have a very successful election in Florida despite all of the challenges. So some of the resources to be aware of are the Florida top issues and FAQs, which we will be sharing with you. They're in the process of being finalized and updated for this cycle. So those will be available to you hopefully this week. The Florida Division of Elections voter lookup page, we've provided links to that throughout this training. That's the place where voters in Florida can go and check on the status of their voter registration, check on the status of their absentee or vote by mail ballot, and also to get additional information, including looking up polling place information. The field captain you'll be assigned to, you'll get a direct phone number for, so you can be in communication with the field captain. And then of course the 8334 turnout phone number to report issues into the hotline. Next slide. This is essentially the information that's available on the Florida Division of Elections voter information lookup page. And I want to caution you that Florida is a little different than some of the other states that allow election protection and lawyers and collars volunteers to look up information for voters. If you're looking up, if a voter calls and needs to have information looked up on the Florida Division of Elections site, it has to be done by the voter. Third parties are not allowed to use the system because of the way the Division of Elections has set the system up. So if a voter calls and needs that information, you can suggest that they use the site, but you can't look up the information for them. However, I'll note that some of the county supervisors of elections websites do not contain an advisory that it's only limited to voters. So on those county sites, you may be able to access the voters' information for them in particular counties, but you have to look and make sure that there's no prohibition on third parties using those county-based lookup tools. Next slide. So this is what the top Florida issues is that one of our documents will be supplying, which will help you, particularly in the field, to identify specific information needed for voters on election day. Next slide. And then the Florida FAQs, which is a deeper dive into the processes in Florida and information that voters need for election day and before election day to register to vote, et cetera. And this is a deeper dive with citations to Florida statutes. So I want to go through sort of an overview of the Florida election law that may be pertinent to your monitoring on election day. Florida voter rules and regulations and laws are pretty comprehensive. So this is just a top line overview. And again, the Florida FAQs will provide deeper depth in terms of the Florida election law if you need that. So this is just an overview. It's not meant to be the end all and be all of Florida election law. So we'll go through voter registration, voter identification, broken equipment issues, assistance for disabled and limited English proficient voters, electioneering, challenges to a voter's eligibility, and vote by mail issues. These are the common issues that typically crop up on election day. Next slide. So voter registration. Today is the final day for voter registration in Florida. And as we speak, I understand that the online voter registration system is down or has been having problems this late afternoon. So our lawyers committee is looking into this as well as other organizations. So hopefully the system will be up today. You have normally until midnight on the book closing day to register using the online system. But if it's down, we're trying to work to see if there's a solution that we can reach with the Division of Elections, or partners may be forced to file litigation. One of the aspects of voter registration that typically comes up on election day are voters who move. And because there's no final deadline for changing your address if you're already a registered voter in Florida, if you're a voter who's moving within the same county, the voter can cast a regular ballot at their new polling place after completing an address change verification form. And this can be done at the new polling place. Voters can check to see what their new polling place is, either by calling the supervisor of elections or by checking online on the supervisor's website if that information is available. Then there's moving between county voters. If the voter's new county uses an electronic poll book, or if the voter is an active uniform services voter, or a member of a service member's family. The voter may cast a regular ballot at their new polling place after completing an address change verification form at the new polling place. In all other circumstances for voters who move between counties, the voter must vote a provisional ballot at the correct precinct in their new county. A voter should not be directed to the polling place for their previous residence address. Next slide. So some of the common reasons voters will be told they're not on the registration list is because of voter list maintenance, where they've been removed from the voter file because of the inactivity and failure to vote, or because they have moved and not changed their address, where they've moved out of state and registered elsewhere and have come back to Florida, or because of a felony conviction where they have not completed the full terms of their felony sentence. In Florida, as you may know, there's been a lot of litigation recently over Amendment 4, which restored the rights of former felons to vote in Florida. And currently, the current posture of the litigation is that voters, unfortunately, who have outstanding terms of fines and fees implicated with their felony sentence are not going to be permitted to register or vote. So voters have to be very careful if they've got a felony criminal conviction. If they believe that they have fully paid their fines and fees, they can register and vote. If they have questions about whether they've satisfied all their fines and fees, they need to contact the Department of Corrections or other groups who are helping voters with Amendment 4 issues, including the restoration of rights people. So we have information about that process in the frequently asked questions, which you'll be supplied with. But if people still owe fines and fees connected with their felony sentence, they would not register or vote. If a voter is in jail or has a conviction for a misdemeanor, they are eligible to vote as long as they are not serving a felony sentence or have felony fines and fees or terms of their sentence still in process. Next page. Common questions about voter ID. Oftentimes, you'll get an inquiry from a voter about what ID do I need? Does my address on my ID need to match the address I'm registered with? Can I use an expired ID? What ID do I need to vote in Florida? There's a list that I provided. You can read the list, it's kind of long. It has to be current and it has to have a valid picture of you on the ID. And then if the ID with the picture does not have your signature, a voter needs a second form of ID with their signature on it in order to be able to vote. Alternatively, if the voter doesn't have the picture ID, next slide, Kina, and they don't have it with them, they can, and they're registered in the state and eligible to vote and they're in their correct polling place, they can vote a provisional ballot, which will be counted if the voter is eligible and registered to vote at the precinct where they voted and the voter's signature matches the information on the registration record. So this is a fail-safe method if the voter does not have their picture ID. Next slide. Does my address on my ID need to match my registration address? The address on the voter's identification in Florida does not need to match the voter's registration address. However, if the address on the ID does not match the address in the registration record, the voter may be asked to provide additional information, but the differing address alone cannot be used as a basis to challenge a voter's legal residence address. Next slide. Can I vote with an expired ID? Florida voters are required to present current and valid photo ID. However, as I mentioned earlier, if the voter does not have a current and valid photo ID when they go to vote and they're properly registered in the precinct, they may cast a provisional ballot, which will count if they are eligible to vote, are registered in the precinct, and their signature matches their registration record. Next slide. You might run into problems on election day where voters are complaining that they couldn't vote because the machines are broken. You should inquire with the voters how much time they've been told it will take for the machines to be fixed. If it's less than 10 minutes, alert the voters standing in line with The information is if it's more than 30 minutes, call the 8334 turnout number and report it for further instructions. And you should flag your field captain so that they can make sure to have all the information needed to follow up with legal volunteers or with local election officials. Common questions about assistance. Now this is assistance in the polls while voters are voting. I'm disabled, can I get help voting? The answer is yes. Under Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act, voters who have a disability, including blindness, can receive assistance in the polling place from a person of the voter's choice, such as a friend, family member, or poll worker. The only exception is that voters cannot be assisted by their employer or an agent of their union. The next question is, my mom, dad, child doesn't speak English, can they get help voting? Yes, voters who cannot read or write English or have limited English proficiency can receive assistance at the polling place from a person of the voter's choice, again, such as a family friend, family member, or poll worker. Again, the restriction on assistance from an employer or union agent applies in the assistance for people with limited English proficiency. Next slide. Common questions about electioneering. This is a question. Democrats or Republicans handed me a leaflet while I was in line. Is that okay? Can I wear political pins, clothing, or hats in the polling place? Under Florida law, the answer is no. Florida prohibits active and passive electioneering within 150 feet of a polling location and inside the polls. This includes displaying election-related materials, soliciting voters, and wearing political buttons, hats, or clothing when voting. EP volunteers and chaplains must comply with the 150-foot barrier unless they're credentialed poll watchers. Next. We also are expecting to encounter vote by mail issues. And typically, because of the volume of vote by mail this cycle, a big complaint is people are not receiving their vote by mail ballot in time, or it arrives late and they're concerned about whether it's going to be received in time. So voters who requested a vote by mail ballot but still want to vote in person can bring their vote by mail ballot with them to the polling place, and it will be canceled. They'll fill out a form and they can vote during early voting or on election day. If the voter requested but has not received their vote by mail ballot, they can still go to the polling place, and if the supervisor of elections can determine that they have not yet received a vote by mail ballot from the voter back yet, they will be allowed to vote a regular ballot. If it can't be determined by the supervisor whether the voter's vote by mail ballot has been returned, they can still vote provisionally. And the ballot will count as long as they determine that the voter had not already returned the vote by mail ballot. Requesting a ballot, voters can also have the option in Florida to request a vote by mail ballot in person at the supervisor of elections office, even if they didn't request it by the deadline to have it mailed to them. So a voter can pick up the vote by mail ballot in person from the supervisor of elections office until 7 p.m. on election day. The voter can designate in writing someone to pick up a vote by mail ballot for them, including on election day or in the 9 days prior, but the designee will have to show photo ID, and if it's on election day, they'll have to sign a form designating the person and saying why an emergency is preventing the voter from going to the polling place on election day themselves. This is called an election day vote by mail ballot delivery affidavit. For more information about that process, you can look on the Division of Elections vote by mail webpage. It's very important that in Florida, vote by mail ballots must be received by the county supervisor of elections office by no later than 7 p.m. on election day. That means that even if you have it postmarked on election day, it will not count unless it's received by the supervisor's office by 7 p.m. on election day. Next slide. Questions about voter challenges. There's a possibility that voters will be challenged this cycle when they go to vote. A registered voter or a poll worker has the ability to challenge the eligibility of a voter to vote in that county. The challenge must be made in writing, and the challenger must sign the challenge under oath. Once the challenge is determined, the person will be able to cast a provisional ballot, which will be counted as long as that voter is eligible to vote in that precinct. If the voter is in the wrong precinct, they'll have an opportunity to go to the correct precinct and cast their ballot there. But they will also have the ability to produce additional information by 5 p.m. on the second day of the election if they need to produce additional information to prove their eligibility. If there's voters reporting problems with being challenged in the polls, you should call the 8334 turnout number to report the incident and wait for some further instructions from the hotline specialist or the field captain about what the next step should be for the particular voter reporting the problem. We also expect there's a possibility that there'll be people outside the polling place harassing voters or discouraging voters from voting or demanding that voters produce ID, which they don't have to do. If you see those incidents occurring, don't engage with the people behaving in this way. You should instead call the 8334 turnout number and wait for further instructions from the hotline specialist or field captain about what the next step should be. Part 4, these are questions and answers of some of the subjects we just discussed. The first question is, the poll worker says, I'm not on the list here. Backstory, I used to live in another precinct in the county. Again, if someone has moved and they've moved within the same county, they can go to the new polling place in the precinct and change their address there and vote a regular ballot. But if they've moved outside the county and they have an electronic poll book in the county where they're voting in the precinct, they can request a regular ballot. If they don't have electronic poll books there, they'll vote a provisional ballot, which will count as long as they're eligible and in the correct precinct. The next question is, can I register to vote and vote on election day? No, in Florida, there's a deadline for voter registration, and that deadline again is today. So if voters are not registered by the end of today at midnight, they will not be able to vote in the election on November 3rd. The next question is, my wallet was stolen yesterday. The only ID I have with me is a utility bill. Can I vote? Backstory, I've voted in this precinct before. In Florida, yes, the voter can vote as long as they're eligible to vote and in the correct precinct. They'll fill out a form, and if the registration signature matches the signature the voter offers when they go to the poll, their vote will count. The next question is, my mom speaks Spanish and has limited English proficiency. Can I help her vote? As long as the mom designates the individual to be their helper and the helper is not an employer or an agent of the union, then the person can provide assistance to their Spanish-speaking mother. Question, is this going to be a problem? A voter asked, pointing to his Vote for Trump t-shirt. It'll be a problem if the voter is in the 150-foot electioneering boundary outside the polling place or within the polling place, because paraphernalia for candidates is not allowed inside the electioneering boundaries or inside the polling place. Question, I've never received my vote by mail ballot. Can I still vote? And the answer is yes. The voter should go to their precinct and explain the situation. They'll have the vote by mail ballot canceled if the supervisor can confirm that a vote by mail ballot hasn't been received yet from the voter, and they'll vote a regular ballot. Otherwise, the voter will vote provisionally, and as long as the vote by mail ballot has not been returned, that ballot will count as a vote. And then, can people inside the poll challenge my right to vote? In Florida, yes, they can, and the voters should provide all the information they have to respond to the challenge, and as long as they are properly registered and eligible to vote in the precinct, that vote should count. And if there's any question or additional information they need to provide, they can do that up to by 5 p.m. 2 days after the election, and then the provisional ballot should count as a vote if they've provided all the information necessary to show that they're eligible and voted in the correct precinct. If it turns out they're in the incorrect precinct and they still have time to go to their correct precinct, they can do that and vote in their correct precinct. So this is a summary of what we hope we've accomplished tonight. The goal was our goal with election protection and with the Lawyers and Collars program is to ensure every eligible voter can cast a ballot that will count as a vote. Our work is all nonpartisan, and it's very important that you don't engage in political discussion with people that you're rendering assistance to or talking to outside the polling places. We've had reports of some bad actors trying to show that groups that are engaged in helping voters are somehow really partisan organizations. So it's very important that you stay within the nonpartisan lane while you're providing assistance to voters and also while you're in proximity to the polling places. And it's very important to wear a mask, obviously, because of the COVID pandemic, and to practice social distancing. Also, if you're providing assistance and are out at the polls, it's very important that you make sure you have a plan to vote so that you are covered and don't have to leave your assignment to go and vote yourself. Try and show up about 15 minutes early to get the lay of the land of your predecessor and what's been happening at the poll, and get an idea of what problems have been going on there before your shift starts. It's better to be calling the hotline if you have any doubt about anything that's happening at the poll, or you've got questions about what you're observing there. Make sure you report it to your field captain and to the hotline. That's all I have. If people have any questions, please let us know in the Q&A.
So I'm going to go ahead and read a few of the Q&A questions. Sandra Sims asks, can those of us serving as election protection chaplains help voters reading the ballot, or can it only be a registered poll worker?
If you're been asked by a voter to help them read a sample ballot outside the polling place, there's no restriction on that as long as you're outside the 150-foot barrier. But if you're going to be providing assistance to a voter inside the polling place, there's only certain situations that allow that. Either you're helping a disabled or blind voter to be able to cast their ballot and interpret the ballot for them, or you're helping someone with limited English proficiency or someone who doesn't read or write English. Those are the circumstances where you can actually be in the poll assisting a voter, and that's only when the voter requests your assistance.
The next question is, what do we do with unauthorized poll workers?
Poll watchers, and I take that to mean people who are in the polls who are not authorized to be in the polls as certified poll watchers. That should be reported to the hotline, and we will report that to the election officials to have that taken care of.
It looks like we don't have any questions in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions? If so, please add it to the chat.
While we're waiting, first of all, I want to thank you and your team, Julie Houck, and you all are amazing, and we think this is great. Pastors, we will be mailing out to everyone who has signed up for this webinar this information. The frequently asked questions, you'll be happy to have those. You can study up for them. Let me just suggest 4 things pastors should be doing to get ready for the election, before the election. Number 1, make sure all of your members are registered to vote. Now, today is the last day, so that might be a moot point, but that would have been helpful if every pastor had made sure his or her members were registered to vote. But what you can do, if they are registered and are planning to vote, number 2, make sure that they know their polling sites. The polling sites can change even before an election. 3rd, make sure they have whatever ID is required. You can check vote.org to find out more information about this. And the final thing that I strongly suggest pastors do is host a Facebook Live or a Zoom conference with your members or people connected to your church. Many pastors have had expanded, quote, membership during the COVID virtual churches. And this is an opportunity to share with people what is on the ballot. Of course, you can't tell people how to vote, but many people do not know the power of a vote for a sheriff, a district attorney who has a lot to say about whether police are charged or not after they shoot someone in the back, kill somebody's child. How about a school board member? Those issues are on the ballot, and you can download that ballot, go over that with them. What about constitutional amendments? What do they mean? How will they affect your community? What about a budget change? Have somebody interpret that for your members if you aren't able to, but make sure your people are fully equipped. And finally, let me ask you, we'll send a thank you letter as well as this presentation to all of you after this session, and we would love for you, be very honest. If it was helpful, let us know. If it's not, let us know. Either way, we need to know because that helps us to beef up our game and make sure that we provide you exactly the kind of information that you need. Are there any other questions, Ms. Jackson?
Yes, Dr. Skinner. This is
Sir.
AJ Richardson.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. Are we working at cross purposes? I was asked by Attorney Sherilyn Eiffel with the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund about having churches provide PPEs for persons who will be voting in person. It would be a nonpartisan effort, but would it be working at cross purposes if we were to use the chaplain's own site to also provide PPEs for persons, personal protective equipment at on site? Would that be a problem?
I don't think so at all. I think we need all the help and all the collaboration and all the partnering we can, Bishop. We're very happy to connect with Sherilyn Eiffel, who's wonderful in their work, and see how we can work together. We will be providing for the pastors who are working with lawyers and collars masks that say TurnOut Sunday lawyers and collars, but we're happy to partner, and we can talk to you after this webinar.
All right, thank you.
And work through Kim McRae for all of that. We definitely need all the help we can get. If that's not, thank you, Bishop, again for raising that. The frequently asked questions, make sure when you get this information, study up on it, because of our vote is our voice. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending the time here, and we pray that this will be helpful to you. Let us hear from you. If you don't like it, we like to hear that. If you like it, then tell us. Only 4 or 5 questions, but it helps us to do better in our job. Thank you, and God bless you. Have a good evening.
Dr. Skinner?
Yes.
Elder Williams?
Yes.
You have Elder Williams?
Oh, I am so sorry. You have helped me so much. I was just missing the closing. Thank you, Ms. McRae. Elder Williams, are you there to give us the closing prayer? How could I ever?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir. I am so sorry. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
shall we?
Yes.
God, we thank you that we are yet alive. Bless us who utilize this gift of life to effect change. We ask your guidance and blessings so that our labor not be in vain. Let every person feel the need, the duty to act on that which was so long denied to so many because of the power associated with voting. Strengthen we all as we move to make this encounter successful. Our future, our respect, long sought and long denied liberty and justice for all is at the forefront of this battle. God, as those before us, we understand the battle and we stand ready to do our part, knowing that you are the author and finisher of our faith. Bless us in this endeavor. Amen.
Now we're ready to go. Thank you so much. That was a powerful prayer. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and may God bless the rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you.